In the shower to get clean.
We had a theory that the definition of beauty was becoming way too narrow. We felt like we had to do something about that.
What Dove did in helping to widen the definition of beauty was it started to show women what real women looked like.
You're gonna age, embrace it. Embrace the age.
I know, but I just can't.
I think that a lot of girls compare themselves to what they see in magazines and like movies and videos.
I don't like my age or my wrinkles, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Not a fan of my belly. I try to hide it sometimes.
My complexion. Bad complexion.
My bum? Can I say that? That was horrible. Okay, here's how I feel about freckles.
I have this scar on my lip.
I guess my forehead is the part of my face that I love the least.
I think it's probably just the whole aging process.
I feel like it throws off, the whole idea of facial symmetry and being beautiful.
I don't dress my age. I dress myself the way I am.
Because my face has nothing to do with my box.
My beauty.
My beauty.
My beauty.
My say.
A slender blonde woman wearing a black dress and combat boots walks into a large warehouse. A soft piano plays as she begins to tell us that while she always thought people who had tiny rosy cheeks were cute, she didn't exactly appreciate this quality in herself. The woman, whom we now know as Olivia, says that if she could change anything about her appearance, it would be her lips. We cut to a thin brunette lady with bangs named Melinda. She describes herself as someone who always looks tired when she's tired, and when people point this out, it is disappointing to her.
Starting to already get little crow's feet and stuff, which my mom has, so.
We cut to an older white man with gray hair who was a forensic composite artist. After meeting him, we overhear one of the women say how they had no idea what was going to happen with this interview. An older blonde woman named Florence recounts walking into the warehouse and seeing a man with his back turned to her as he drew on a drafting board.
I had a curtain separating me so that I don't see him.
He asked them to describe their appearances to him as he secretly sketches them.
Tell me about your hair.
Brown, long, I guess a little bit past my shoulders.
What would be your most prominent feature?
I kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
After he draws their pictures, they come back and are asked to describe the appearances of the other women involved in this experiment.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin was a nice, thin chin.
As he draws on their interpretations of the other women, he says that the women were very critical of their moles and scars, and
yet they were describing just a normal, beautiful person.
A normal, beautiful person. At the end of the experiment, the women are brought back to the warehouse to see their self-described sketch versus their peer-described sketch, or however we're going to phrase that. Now, as I play this clip, please pay attention to the actual differences between these sketches as a soft guitar plays in the background.
And then somebody else described you and I did this sketch.
I have this whole thing about having dark circles and crow's feet around my eyes, and that was not part of the sketch at all that the stranger did.
It's really different. Which is very strange.
What's a little sad to me is the things the women say about these sketches. Kayla, I think her name is, describes her self-portrait as closed off and fatter, and says the second one is more beautiful.
She just looks kind of shut down. Sadder, too. She looks more open and friendly and happy.
Florence says she has some work to do on herself and describes her peer portrait as someone she'd actually want to hang out with.
Chloe's perception was so clearly different. Like a happy, light, much younger, much brighter person.
Much younger, much brighter person. Florence then says she should be more grateful of her natural beauty and that it can affect your family and your ability to be happy.
It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
One of the women says that our self-perception is harsh and the world doesn't really see you the way you see you. She also says we should spend more time appreciating the things about ourselves that we do like rather than what we don't like. The video ends on the famous white Dove screen with a caption that reads, "You are more beautiful than you think." period. So, a lot to unpack. I vividly remember when this first came out, or at least when it appeared on YouTube. I remember watching the entire thing in full when I was still a teenager. Now, I can't say it had much of an effect on me because I was really depressed in high school, so nothing would have made me feel better about anything, but I do remember thinking that it was kind of cool that Dove did this. I remember thinking, how nice that a corporation would care so much about the self-esteem of women. Then more and more of these ads started coming out, or at least to me, they were just coming out. I wasn't aware that this campaign had begun almost 10 years before this video. In 2004, Dove launched their Real Beauty campaign. The campaign was born out of a global study that was commissioned by Dove, who wanted to understand how women actually felt about their appearance. The study comprised of 3,200 women aged 18 to 64 who were all interviewed over the phone across 10 different countries. Dove's mission in commissioning the Real Truth About Beauty study was to explore empirically what beauty means to women today and why that is. Further, Dove wanted the study to access whether it was possible to talk and think about female beauty in ways that were more authentic, satisfying, and empowering. The women were given positive and neutral choices to describe their own appearances, such as beautiful, sexy, gorgeous, average, and natural. As you can probably guess, most of the women had trouble describing themselves as beautiful. One part of the study found that women in Japan were more likely to think of themselves as less attractive than women from other countries. They were asked about their self-esteem, they were asked to define their weight, they were questioned about pop culture's role in making women feel like they must attain a certain beauty standard. Towards the end of the study, they were asked how the media could do a better job of representing women in terms of beauty. One of the biggest findings from this study was the fact that only 2% of the women chose beautiful to describe themselves. And then Dove was like, we could market this. So instead of creating advertisements that would further diminish the self-esteem of women like everything else in this awful country, they decided they were going to make women's low self-esteem a project. A project that would separate Dove from all the other soap brands. In 2006, Unilever, which owns Dove and other feminist products like Axe and Glow and Lovely, or as it was previously called, Fair and Lovely, launched an ad called Evolution. The ad starts off with a white woman with no makeup on, sitting down in a chair and looking directly into the camera. The time is sped up and piano music plays as we see people apply makeup to her face and curl her hair. Once they are finished, we watch as her face is photoshopped and altered. The last shot is that of her new face plastered across a large billboard. It fades into a black screen with a caption that reads, "No wonder our perception of beauty is so distorted," and that encourages viewers to take part in the Dove Real Beauty workshops for girls. There was also another ad called Onslaught, which is meant to show how beauty products and dieting ads targeted towards women can have a negative impact on young girls. The caption at the end of this one reads, "Talk to your daughter before the beauty industry does." As the years went on, Dove would continue to promote this campaign. They were committed, okay? They have so many videos on their channel that are centered around women being interviewed about their flaws and imperfections or their experiences with having natural black hair versus straight silky hair. Not only that, but they would interview moms and daughters who would express insecurities about aging and developing things like crow's feet and loose skin, as the daughters complained about having blotchy skin and not feeling comfortable letting their hair down. Then, of course, there were the Dove Real Beauty sketches that aired in 2013. This video went viral, and this, along with all the other popular ads, was parodied to hell.
How do you feel about your appearance?
Good. Pretty good.
There's definitely room for improvement.
I feel okay about it. You know, I have good days, bad days.
Yeah, that bad, okay.
Dove had set out to do a mission, and they did not abandon it. To this day, they still make these types of ads. However, they probably don't go as viral as they used to. Now, while I do feel these ads in this campaign maybe had good intentions, it did seem like after a while, Dove had started to feel themselves a little too much. Remember those different shaped bottles that Dove came out with 5 years ago? I've never been able to forget this, and even as someone who buys Dove and uses Dove, I always think of this when I think of them. Dove is not ashamed of having done this. It's still on their website, and on that page it says, "Beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, from curvaceous to slender, tall to petite, and whatever your skin color, shoe size, or hair type. Beauty comes in a million different shapes and sizes." Our 6 exclusive bottle designs celebrate this diversity. Just like women, we wanted to show that our iconic bottle can come in all shapes and sizes too. How is this not satire? This seriously feels like an SNL sketch or something. I felt like Dove was trolling us with this one. But it shouldn't surprise us that a corporation would be so far up their own ass to actually think of something like this. While this real beauty campaign had come to define Dove, people began to question the actual sincerity of this campaign. As I mentioned earlier, Unilever, which owns Dove, famously produces other products that reinforce toxic beauty standards, like Glow and Lovely, formerly known as Fair and Lovely, a whitening cream sold in India. The ads for this product feature women who are dark-skinned and are unhappy with their current lives until they put on this whitening cream that makes them look more fair-skinned, and now their life is awesome. The first ad for the Real Beauty campaign featured 8 women, 5 white, 3 non-white, and 1 with a little bit of fat on her stomach. This inclusion of mostly white, mostly able-bodied, mostly straight-sized women had become pretty glaring. Heist leveled a strong critique with specific regard to Dove's campaign for Real Beauty, drawing on feminist disability theory, a framework to analyze and critique social systems and material practices that stigmatize certain kinds of bodily variations, i.e. people with disabilities. The key motives are forging positive identities and promoting the inclusion of women with disabilities in mainstream society. Heist argues that these types of campaigns, whose aim is to promote positive body image, in fact represent an ideology of naive integration. This type of ideology espouses an acceptance of diverse body types, but at the same time reflects traditional beauty standards. For example, Dove sought to challenge dominant beauty norms by depicting real women with real curves in their advertisements. However, it is argued that these real women appear similar enough to pre-existing ideals that they too would be accepted by most beauty standards, suggesting a failure on Dove's account to truly widen the definition of beauty. Furthermore, she argues that in neglecting to include a woman with a disabled body in their campaign ad, Dove fails to ascribe a value to certain very real body types and instead reinforces traditional understandings of the body and of beauty. This is evident in Dove's casting calls, which read, "No tattoos, no scars, flawless skin, beautiful hair, and bodies that fall nicely between not too curvy and not too athletic." Moreover, there have also been claims that Dove engages in digital retouching of their ad campaigns, explicitly in contradiction of their ad campaign's message. In a Medium article from 2019 titled, "How Dove Once Tried to Celebrate Body Shapes and Failed," the author writes, quote, "The biggest assumption that Dove made with this campaign is that women want their body shapes represented in bottle form. Dove's research showed 1 in 2 women feel pressure to look a certain way by social media. Thus, they wanted to do their part to help women embrace their own individuality as a source of confidence. The problem is that women do not need a reminder of their body shape whenever they are in the bathroom. It is offensive for women to have to choose their body wash based on their body shape. It is bringing unnecessary attention to women's bodies. This alone makes their entire Real Beauty campaign seem disingenuous, nothing more than a marketing ploy. Even if the idea was not distasteful, it also makes another assumption that all body shapes can be sorted into 6 different types. It actually ends up being more exclusive than inclusive. There is no hidden meaning behind a regular bottle of body wash. I do not pick up a cylindrical bottle and think of how I wish my abs were more toned, because it does not make an association with body image. But with these bottles that look like the curves of women, it makes women categorize their own shapes. And when this does not happen easily, then women can become more aware that they do not even belong to the conventional 6 ways that Dove has decided women look like. This campaign does not feel like it considered the demographic they were targeting. Even though these bottles were not available to purchase but only gifted as a thank you to a select few, they were still trying to sell the idea of celebrating body diversity. In this case, they tried and failed. Another way they tried and failed is with the Real Beauty sketches. The artist says that the women were very critical of their scars and moles. Now, the film is short, and so they obviously didn't show everything the women said as he was drawing, but from what I saw, all they did was describe what their face looks like. He asked them to describe their face and then asked them to describe their most prominent features. Just because someone points out their crow's feet doesn't necessarily mean that they're being critical of themselves. It doesn't mean that they're not, but he took that to mean that they were being mean to themselves, and you already know what I'm gonna say. I think that's interesting.
Oh my god! Oh my god! What the f***?
You look in the mirror and what you see is a disgusting zoo animal.
I don't think that I look like a zoo animal.
When they come out to see their self-described portrait, they're made to feel that their own descriptions of themselves is not only inaccurate, but ugly. In the case of Florence, it's very strange because she is older and you can tell that she is. That's not a bad thing, but the artist wants to convince her that her peer-described portrait that doesn't represent her age is how she should see herself. She even says that this version represented someone she would want to hang out with, and it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to hang out with her? because she has wrinkles and age spots. I thought women weren't supposed to feel bad about those things. I thought that's what we were trying to change. I feel like all this did for Florence was reinforce more ageist beauty ideals. She was basically told that looking younger and brighter is better than looking old and dim, I guess. This could have been more insightful if the women were just asked about why they find those features to be unattractive in the first place. Because at the end of the day, these are sketches. Even despite their self-described sketches, they are not precise representations of how these women actually look. Now, I don't want to take anything away from anyone. If this film made you reevaluate how you see yourself, I think that's awesome. Over the past 10 years, the Dove ads have been criticized and satirized everywhere. And I'm sure you're expecting me to dunk on these ads as well. While I do think these ads are kind of bullshit, I'm not really interested in dunking on them. It is fair to be critical of Dove, especially considering they are owned by a company that doesn't even practice what Dove preaches. However, I feel like some people who criticize these ads are doing it in a very turn your nose up kind of way. There was like a level of eye rolling that these ads elicit in some people. I'll never forget this one time my mom and I were watching good old Dr. Phil. I don't remember the name of the episode or what the topic of the episode was, but what I remember is once the first guest on the show had left, they brought in 2 young white girls for a short little segment at the end. The women came on to talk about their insecurities and how social media sites like IG caused them to develop a deep envy towards other women on the platform. As soon as the women started talking about their jealousy and insecurities, my mom rolled her eyes so hard. It was just like, oh Lord, please, let's turn this shit. Like, damn, ma. This is something I have noticed in a lot of people I have met throughout the years. There are a lot of people who find women complaining about their body image insecurities to be annoying. It's not just that these women hate how they hate how they look so much so that they have specific parts of their faces that they find revolting. I hate my mole. I hate this scar on my lip that makes my face look crooked or something. I hate the way my chin protrudes outward when I smile. Many people look at this as a bunch of shallow people who are so self-involved that they would be insecure about such a small flaw on their face. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't used to feel like this as well. I had a similar feeling when I learned about all these insane plastic surgery procedures people were getting a few years ago. It's so easy to dismiss these things and turn your nose up at the ridiculousness of women and beauty standards. What's frustrating though is a lot of these people whom I have met who get irritated with this stuff are sometimes the most judgmental people I have ever met. Not to shit on my mama, but she is incredibly fat phobic and cannot help herself when she sees a very fat person in public. She has to make a comment about how big they are, and she has to express the disgust she feels at how a person could be that big. I have siblings who love to talk shit about how ugly a certain celebrity is because of their weird eyes or whatever. Sometimes they'll even suggest that these people get work done. But then when some of those people do get work done and the work they get done doesn't necessarily make them look better in the way people want, they shit on them for that too. What I'm trying to say here is that we love to talk down to people who have low self-esteem or insecurities about their appearance. We don't really take the conversation around beauty standards very seriously because it is considered a women's issue, and an issue that has often been framed as individualistic. We rarely ever ask these people, well, why do you feel that way about yourself? And where does that come from? 8 times out of 10, it came from something someone said. It came from someone judging you for how you look. For example, I have a tiny stubble of hair on my face and I have sideburns. But I didn't really notice, nor did I think it was a problem until my nephew stared at me one day when he was like 12 and was like, what is that on your face? With this horrifying look as if it was so baffling that a woman could have hair on her face. My older sister also took delight in making fun of me for the little hairs on my chinny chin. Obviously, I'm not still mad at my nephew or sister for this. They were kids, but that shit fucked me up. To this day, I still shave off my sideburns and pluck that little stubble under my chin because those comments made me feel really self-conscious, and it's not easy to let go of that stuff. There's an episode of This Is Us called The Pool. In this episode, we see the Pearson family getting ready to go to the pool. Cute and adorable Kate Pearson is so excited about going and is eager to show off her Care Bear swimsuit. Her dad makes sure to let her know that she looks beautiful despite her mom being fat phobic and annoying. Sadly though, once they get to the pool, Kate's confidence is completely taken away from her. A group of young girls who are smaller than her tell her they don't want to hang out with her because she's fat. This causes Kate to want to literally hide her body. She asks her dad if she can wear his shirt. He tries to cheer her up, but she is no longer excited about showing off this swimsuit. This episode has always stuck with me because it's such a great portrayal of what happens when you make kids feel ashamed of how they look. It can have lasting effects on their self-esteem that more than likely was probably pretty high until someone told them that they didn't earn that confidence. It's similar to when adults make a big deal about how skimpy or non-skimpy a certain piece of clothing is on a prepubescent child. I remember my ex-uncle telling me that wearing a skirt and having your legs open would classify you as a slut. I was 8 years old. People have a tendency to police people's bodies, especially kids, and project their own insecurities and fears on them and then act surprised when those kids develop an ED or are self-conscious or have low self-esteem when they get older. Now, I'm not saying everyone who is insecure about their looks is insecure solely because of something someone said. Sometimes people hate how they look because how they look is never represented on screen. I'm saying all this to say that people's insecurities don't come from nowhere, and it's frustrating to me when people act like it's the person's fault for not being stronger or something. You just have low self-esteem, and well, if you didn't have low self-esteem, you wouldn't be bothered by that stuff. Again, as if low self-esteem comes from nowhere and not external factors. Like in that clip I showed earlier with the mom saying she doesn't like her age or her wrinkles. That is not just someone who is just insecure for no reason. She probably hates her age and her wrinkles because we live in a society that loves to praise people for aging gracefully. We literally treat people who age normally, with wrinkles and age spots and loose skin, as if they have failed at aging. We act like people who age gracefully age that way because they are good people who have led good lives. We are associating looking old when you get old as a sign that you're a terrible person. Like, what? It's so fucked up and it literally doesn't make any sense. My point here is that most people are pretty judgmental and vain and reinforce toxic beauty ideals in their personal lives because we are inundated with those toxic messages and images every day. But there is something to be said about the way we collectively cringe at hearing people talk about these seemingly minuscule issues that we all grapple with to some degree. The person who rolls their eyes at young girls being envious on social media is probably a person who has some physical insecurity, some weird supposed flaw that they hate but are afraid to admit. Because to be open about your physical insecurities is to be vulnerable, but it's also to be vain. And when you live in a society that vilifies vanity and mocks vulnerability, it's easier to just make yourself seem above it all. Now, what was the actual impact of these ads? Did they change the way women see themselves? Did they dismantle the beauty industry? Have women stopped contorting themselves to fit into the male gaze? People stopped associating their weight with their self-worth? Has the dye industry fallen? Obviously no, because, well, do I need to sing it? Of course, I'm not naive enough to think that Dove soap was going to solve body image issues in women. I'm adult enough to know that short little ads with soft guitar playing in the background where women confess to their biggest physical insecurities were not going to actually cause a monumental change in the way women view themselves. Yes, Dove was able to use studies and shocking statistics as a way to further legitimize the need for ads like Onslaught and Evolution. But Dove is still a company trying to sell you soap, but really wants to feel charitable while doing so. But to say they didn't have any impact isn't actually true. Dove and the Real Beauty campaign, as argued by Aubrey Gordon, in a way led to the capitalist takeover of the body positive movement that took Instagram by storm during the 2010s. The Dove campaign for Real Beauty set the stage for this new era of marketable female empowerment and choice feminism and women reclaiming their bodies and leaning in and being a hashtag girl boss. Companies began using pro-woman talking points in their ads that expressed some truths but weren't so radical as to not scare off anyone. Kind of like the Barbie movie. In an article for the QuirkyPineapple.com, the author describes this marketing trend as Femvertising, a term coined by She Knows Media in 2014. Defined as advertising that employs pro-female talent, messages, and imagery to empower women and girls. At first glance, femvertisements can seem like a net positive for the feminist movement. As Emily Pierce says in an article for LinkedIn, all this goes along to helping the feminist movement as it repositions feminist issues and feminism itself from a radical fringes of society thing to an everyday challenge that we all need to tackle. However, there's also a downside. Some brands are using feminism to simply increase profit and popularity. They pump out insincere messages, which end up being laughed at, which in turn can damage the legitimacy of feminism. These businesses devalue the feminist movement. Returning to the Quirky Pineapple article, the author describes how these companies marketing feminism in a way that can appeal to the masses has helped to perpetuate this false notion that feminism has been solved and equality has been achieved. Going back to the original Dove campaign for Real Beauty photo shoot, we get a marketable vision of body inclusivity. No one is too fat as to make anyone uncomfortable. We have an elderly woman, and there's enough white faces as to not seem too diverse. While they may have been radical at the time, constantly seeing these watered down messages about real beauty and real women on YouTube and on Instagram have led many to think that we have solved body image issues. Everyone is okay with fat people now, supposedly. Remember Lizzo? Remember pre-cancellation, how everyone loved her and no one on planet Earth fat shamed her ever? Plus, women are posting pictures of their stretch marks and post-pregnancy bodies. And fat people who weigh over 250 pounds are concern trolled and told to put down the cheeseburgers and get on the treadmill. But it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Because look, Amy Schumer is showing off her abs and I feel pretty, so we did it, y'all. Body image issues solved. Now, there have been many a take on the body positivity movement over the past few years. People, mainly those who are already anti-fat, have long argued that it glorifies obesity. And boy, do they love saying that one. They claim the movement supposedly encourages fat people to remain fat and unhealthy. I've also heard that it endorses toxic positivity. These takes are false and detrimental because, for one, they imply that body positivity did anything good for actual fat people as a whole, which it did not. Two, by claiming that it encourages fat people to remain fat and unhealthy, it's saying that one can only be positive if they are presentably healthy, as in thin. It's also saying that it's wrong for a fat person to want to remain fat. Regardless of whether you feel being fat is unhealthy or whatever, people have a right to be proud of the body that they have. That's the whole fucking point of the movement. Also, this myth of glorifying obesity predicates on the idea that fat people simply existing and not apologizing for their existence or aren't posting about their weight loss journey somehow have an agenda, and that agenda is inherently destructive to society, which, if you know your history, you'll know is a common and useful tactic utilized by people who oppose progress. Lastly, it overstates the issue of toxic positivity. While that is certainly an issue with the movement, it's not the issue in my opinion. These takes often gloss over the actual history of the movement, which is extremely necessary to know and understand when critiquing the actual problems with it. Dove deserves to be included in that complex history because not only is it a precursor, but a foreshadowing of the monster that will be born from it.
You can thank Dove. Okay, just thank Dove. Hashtag True Beauty. No, just thank them. We showed you using science.
No.
Dove, you fell for our weird psychology experiment and it showed you you're not actually a hideous monster, so where's our Nobel Peace Prize or whatever?